Aloha mai kako. My name is Kainoa Danes, Director of Culture and Product Development at the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau. The Hawaiian culture is the foundation of these islands, and it is our kuleana, our responsibility to know, understand, and share it correctly. Mahalo for joining us as we explore the important aspects of the culture, language, guiding principles, and values, and how best we can incorporate and appreciate them in our daily lives. At the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau, our focus is to enrich Hawaii and its people by attracting visitors who will leave this place better than when they arrived. As a member of the HVCB, we invite you to join us in that mission, join us on that journey. Welcome and mahalo for taking this cultural training.
Ano ai ko ka kou mea hoki palaea. A me nā mea hano hano. Ke ho o hiwa hiwa ia nei mā ko laea. Ia hi puu ia ka kohi ka lokahi. Ka nalu I mea ka kou mai ka hiki mai laea. Me ke alo hano ka koa pau. Aloha mai kako. Excited to have you with us today. We'll sit back, relax, and we're going to learn a little bit more about the Hawaiian culture. A little bit more about myself. So in addition to Director of Culture and Product Development, which has been about a couple of years now, prior to that with the Oahu Visitors Bureau for about 8. So total with the Visitors Bureau for almost 10 years. And then a little bit of life before that, my professional life as a hotelier in Queen Kapilani Hotel, the former beautiful Miramar at Waikiki, now part of the International Marketplace. Studied hospitality at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. That's my day job, my daytime, if you will. My evening, my nights, my weekends, my rest of my life, very culturally involved. Active member of the Royal Order of Kamehameha Ikahi. Very involved at the Iolani Palace and King Kamehameha celebration festivities. A student of Kumuhula Loeahula Kahai Tapulinski for several years, and a former board member and cultural trainer at the Native Hawaiian Hospitality Association. So excited to share with you from both my professional background as well as my cultural and personal background as we go through today's training. With that, I ask that you keep an open mind. So as we go from slide to slide and I share different things, I want you to know where I've learned from my teachers. And so I'll be sharing things from that perspective. And if you've heard things or learned things a little bit differently, there's nothing wrong with that, because all knowledge is not taught in the same school. So yeah, keep an open mind as we move forward, and we look forward to spending some quality time together. In this session, Hawaiian Culture 101, we're going to be learning some basics. And so we have it broken down for you here. We're going to start with some Hawaiian values. We're going to talk about why Hawaii is unique, what makes Hawaii special, and tips and tools to help you to help separate Hawaii from other destinations, other places around the world, customs and traditions that we may come into contact with, and how to best approach them. And that leads us to protocols, and at the very final, their resources. So again, this is just what we're going to be covering for this training. What makes our sun, our sand, and our surf so special from other parts of the world? Our people. And that includes you and me. And this is true for anywhere in the world. This isn't just here in Hawaii, but we are talking about Hawaii. And it's really the people and the story that we tell, the lives that we live, and the message that we have to share with our visitors that helps to separate us from the rest of the people around the world. And we are the reason that people are coming to Hawaii. Yes, we do have arguably the most beautiful beaches in the world, so the sun, sand, and surf is important, but it's really the culture of these islands that people are coming to visit and experience when they come to Hawaii. A mentor of mine, very well known in the visitor industry, Mr. Peter Apo, shared with me years ago that his definition of hospitality, which we are all in the business of, is accepting responsibility for a guest and an unconditional extension of trust and friendship. And the key word that we want to highlight here and talk about for a minute is that word responsibility. Responsibility for a guest and a responsibility for the extension of trust and an extension of that friendship to that guest. Responsibility in the Hawaiian language is kuleana. Take a moment and pronounce that with me. Kuleana. In the Hawaiian language, values in most words have many more meanings than just one quick translation, as they often does in English. The word kuleana, as we say there, this is copied right out of the Hawaiian Language Dictionary. It means responsibility. But when we look at the word that's a few words prior to that, the word that we see is privilege. And I mentioned a little earlier that my kumu is Kahai Tapolensky, and one of his teachers was none other than historian and scholar Mary Kavenapukui, one of the authors of the Hawaiian Language Dictionary. And it was Tutu Pukui who I asked in class one day, I said, Kumu, when she wrote the Hawaiian Language Dictionary, did she haphazardly throw the words in there, or did she have a little more rhyme and reason? He said she did everything with purpose. And so you see the way she lapped out these words here. So responsibility, very important, very high up on the list, but it's the fourth word. The second word is privilege. And when we think about our kuleana, our responsibility as a privilege, we think about it as I get to instead of I have to. It takes on a much different meaning for us. And we see a little further down, I also highlighted the word ownership. So taking ownership of that privilege and being responsible for ourselves, responsible for our stories, responsible for those around us. Yeah, we are lucky to be able to call Hawaii home, or we're lucky to be able to sell and promote Hawaii. So it's important that we all are sharing in this responsibility and this privilege and this ownership of kuleana. Aloha. What does aloha mean? When we use this word, when we think about it, when we write it in an email, when we say it, when we convey it to somebody, what does that mean to us? What does that mean when we say the word aloha? Because it's much more than just hello, goodbye, and I love you. And so often that's the translation that people give to it. But aloha means so much more. Aloha is a feeling, it's an emotion, it's even a way of life. And when we're not using that aloha in Hawaii, we're technically breaking the law. Hawaii Revised Statute 5-7.5, the Aloha Spirit Law. And it's defined here in the Hawaii State Constitution, written back in the early 1980s. Aloha Spirit is the coordination of mind and heart within each person. And it took me years to kind of wrap my brain around what does that mean, the coordination of mind and heart within each person? Well, when you think about how we make decisions, yeah, logically we make a decision with our mind, or emotionally or with our feelings, we make a decision with our heart. And what they're saying here, and what I'm interpreting this to mean, is that when we take a moment and find balance, or in this case, coordination between the two, that is an act of aloha. And I really like the way they explain that in the state constitution. Further in the revised statute, and I just copied this and pasted right out of the revised statutes, and you've seen this around most likely. You've seen it perhaps on the internet, you've maybe seen it on a billboard, you've seen it on a commercial, but the way we break down the word aloha by Auntie Pilahi Paki, akahai, kindness. But what they did here was they took it a step further and added tenderness to that kindness. Lokahi, unity. You and I can be singing the same song, but if we're singing in different keys and not finding balance and harmony, we're going to sound pretty terrible. So that balance is very important. And again, this is all further explaining the word aloha. Olu olu, to be agreeable, but also be pleasant in being agreeable. Yeah, being nice about that. Ha'a ha'a, humility, wrapped in modesty. And last but not least, and oftentimes the most difficult one for us as human beings, is ahu nui, or patience. But what I love that they did about here is the added perseverance, because maybe right now is not the time. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but finding aloha in that moment to be patient with people. Also important as we live our daily lives. The law is pretty extensive and goes on further to cover greetings and farewells. We did talk about that earlier. Mutual regard and affection for one another. Essence of relationships, also important in the view of aloha. But last but certainly not least were words that were uttered by our last reigning queen, Queen Liliuokalani. Her definition of aloha was to hear what is not said, see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. How beautiful that they would add that to the state constitution. But more importantly, how important for us to think about aloha in what we do within the hospitality industry. To hear what is not said, to see what cannot be seen, and to know the unknowable. I think about that as somewhat the art of anticipation, anticipating our guests' needs and wants, pausing, finding that patience, finding that humility to listen to our guests, listen to their needs. What do they need? How can I help them? How can I be for them, be there for them? And I think that is one of the purest and most beautiful ways of expressing and sharing our aloha. Hey, aloha, che, a little aloha in our day. Spread a little aloha around the world. Aloha aku, aloha mai. Aloha is an absolutely reciprocal value and a reciprocal feeling, again, an emotion. when we share our genuine tenderness, our genuine patience and kindness with an individual, it's almost impossible for them not to share that back with you. So again, we here in Hawaii have been able to take the universal concept of the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and make it a little bit more tangible with the word aloha. So once again, aloha aku, aloha mai. Now we're going to take it back to high school level. Yeah, we're going to take a little bit back and we're going to talk about why Hawaii is so unique and why Hawaii is so special. So, tectonic plate movement. I'm not going to get into all the science of it exactly, but Hawaii, these islands came up from a hot spot. Yeah, a little opening in the Earth's mantle, on the middle of a tectonic plate, the Pacific plate, and as it moves in a westerly direction, every so many centimeters a year, new land is formed with this hotspot. The volcanoes pop up, and so you see the older islands, Kauai, Oahu, moving in that western direction on the plate as it moves in. So currently the hotspot being right under the island of Hawaii, and the new island in a few million years, the island of Lo'ihi, will break the water's surface. And again, we're talking about this because the chance of these islands to have appeared in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the most isolated islands in the world, what a unique place, these islands. And then black rock. Yeah, so now we're millions of years in the past. We're not there, we're not here in the present yet. So millions of years ago, these little black rocks are popping up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, just happenstance, just by chance. And all we see at that point is just black rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But how did things get here? How did things get to Hawaii? Yeah, this middle of the ocean, again, the most isolated chain of islands. Somehow things had to get here. Well, in the very, very beginning, the only things that could get here were things that were blown in the wind, on wing of a bird, or on a wave. So seeds and birds were the primary things that could get to these islands and settle here. And we're so glad they did, because once they got here, they were then able to make a new home for themselves and become something quite different from other parts around the world. And once here, these seeds planted their roots. Yeah, seeds from around the world blown again on the winds, a current, on the bellies of the opu, or stuck to the wings of the birds that flew over or perhaps floated over from other parts of the world, finding their way to these islands. Again, unique circumstances that have all taken place over millennia to make this place this special Hawaii that we know it today. And once they got here and planted their roots and began growing and spreading, they also began evolving. Yeah, different species of birds and plants and animals, insects, all becoming different subspecies. The honey creeper came out here on one bird, flew out here million years ago, and evolved into 30 or more species. I mean, what an amazing place. If Darwin had come here, I think his theory of evolution might have actually been much broader in effect. So everybody coming here, again, what we're talking about are unique things about Hawaii, things that have happened over time to make Hawaii this very special place. And we see a little over 2,000 years ago, coming on the water, finding their way by looking up and wayfinding and navigating, people from the South Pacific, from Tahiti and the Marquesas Islands, eventually making their way to Hawaii and bringing with them their own plants, their own animals, and especially what we're going to cover here more in more depth, language and culture. And these began the forefathers of the Hawaiian people. In addition to Polynesians, others began making their way here to the Hawaiian Islands. Captain Cook made his way. Whalers seeking to seek their fortune, and the missionaries. They also came to Hawaii. Everyone coming, adding a little seasoning to the stew. So often we talk about Hawaii as a melting pot. And sure, I guess I see the analogy. But have you ever looked in a pot full of something that's melted together? It's not the most pleasant thing to look at. I prefer to think about Hawaii as a stew. Everyone adding their own seasoning and flavoring, and yet living together harmoniously and deliciously. All the while, the kingdom of Hawaii carrying on with different leaders, with different influences from the outside, changing their perspectives of law, of governance, but still the Hawaiian people, the Hawaiian kingdom, the Hawaiian culture, continuing on as change continues to come to these islands. Again, everyone adding a little bit of their seasoning to the stew, everything making Hawaii what it is beautiful and unique place that it is today. But people didn't stop coming. Yeah, a lot of people kept coming. A lot of people who live in Hawaii today can trace their ancestry back to Hawaiians, but also to Japanese that came, Filipinos, Chinese, Portuguese, Later, so many others, Koreans, Puerto Ricans, later Micronesians, so many people have come to Hawaii. And again, each adding their essence, their culture, their language, the origins of the plate lunch and the pidgin language come from the plantation era. So we have so many things. Again, we're still talking about all these circumstances that took place over time that have made Hawaii the very special and beautiful place that she continues to be today. Now, on the path of uniqueness, I want to share some fun facts with you about Hawaii, things that you can share with others. Hawaii is the only state that has the Union Jack in the upper corner, as we're the only state to have ever once been a kingdom, a republic, a territory, and today a state. We are also the only state out of all 50 that has 2 official languages. Hawaiian and English are on equal footing in Hawaii, and the only state to have our native language as one of our official languages. We're also the only state that has an anthem not in English. Hawaii Pono'i, written by Henry Berger and King Kalakaua, is in the Hawaiian languages, was once upon a time the national anthem of the Kingdom of Hawaii. And again, there's so many other unique fun facts. I just highlighted a few, but this last one here, we're also the only state to celebrate holidays where we have off of work or the banks might be closed to celebrate monarchs. King Kamehameha Day on June 11th. Founded first in 1872, and Prince Kuhio Day started in 1949, celebrated in March 26. Most other states really no other state in the kingdom, in the Union celebrate monarchs the way we do here in Hawaii. Now let's take a moment and look at that flag that we see there in the background. I mentioned earlier this is the only state with the Union Jack in the corner, and why would that be? Yeah, so Captain Cook, when he arrived in the 1770s, he arrived with the Union Jack. So just take that one section in the corner alone, not all the large stripes. And that was the flag of England, of the United Kingdom rather. And Kamehameha the Great, he really liked this flag. And this is just a brief, quick history of the flag. And he liked the flag, and so he is known to have flown the Union Jack on some of his sailing canoes. But basically, he couldn't do that. That was the flag of King George in England. And so with some assistance from Captain Cook, a committee was formed, if you will, and this flag was created. So they took the Union Jack, and Kamehameha showing his allegiance to King George, his partnership, in a sense, if you will, with England. He put that on the flag, and the 8 stripes, you see starting with white, red, and blue, those represent the 8 Hawaiian Islands. And so this flag was created back in the 1780s and is the only flag that has ever flown. This is the true Hawaiian flag. So if you see any other flags, of any other colors, specifically red, green, and yellow, that is not a Hawaiian flag. That was a flag that was created much, much later and is not truly a Hawaiian flag. So there really only is one Hawaiian flag. Ku'uhai Hawaii is this flag right here, a flag created by King Kamehameha the Great with the assistance of Captain Cook. And if it was good enough for the king, it's good enough for me. The ma'ohauhele. This is the state flower of the state of Hawaii, the hibiscus. And now when we say the state flower is the hibiscus, we don't mean all hibiscus are the state flower. If you see a beautiful red one, a pink one, an orange one, a white one, beautiful. It's a beautiful hibiscus, absolutely. But this specifically in front of us, the ma'ohauhele, and there's a Latin name. You can try to pronounce that on your own. Hibiscus brackenridgei A. Gray is my attempt at it, but that is the true state flower of Hawaii. And if you're ever doing any kind of marketing where you're using the state flower on it, you would want to use this one. This again is the specific state flower, the ma'ohauhele of Hawaii, native to these islands. Hopefully you'll have a chance later, if you haven't already, to tune in for our Hawaiian language lesson, and you'll be able to then pronounce the humu humu nuku nuku apua'a, our state fish. Yeah, it does take a little practice, but it's actually very easy once you master the vowels. As we talked about earlier, a lot of birds made their way over to Hawaii back millennia ago and evolved into their own subspecies. And here's a perfect example. Our state bird, the nene, or the Hawaiian goose, is a subspecies of the Canadian goose. And it wouldn't be appropriate to say nene goose because nene literally means goose. So nene goose means goose goose. And unless you're playing around of duck duck goose goose, it doesn't make sense. The state tree is the kukui. And while this is an introduced plant, a tree that was brought in later and it wasn't a native to these islands, it still was a very important plant or tree to the Hawaiian people. So many different medicinal purposes. The kukui nut itself serving, creating light, oil, used in cooking, a symbol of enlightenment, such an important plant here in the Hawaiian Islands. So once again, the state tree for the state of Hawaii is the candlenut or the kukui. And we mustn't forget this friend of ours. So many people come to these islands to enjoy whale watching, especially on Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. But the state mammal is the beautiful kohola, or the humpback whale. We're going to take a few minutes now and talk a little bit more about customs and traditions. I know there's a lot to see on the screen there, but what I would recommend at this point is to pause or take a screenshot, and then you can see what it is better there. You can see some of the breakdown, ahupua'a, and we're going to have a section on that as well, so hopefully you've taken that or you'll take that lesson with us. A little bit more about Aloha Friday, talk story, Hawaiian practices there, and the big kahuna usage, heiau, humor and wordplay, things that you can kind of read a little bit more on your own. But in reference to the word kahuna, I want to take a moment and think about that. Again, this lesson is Hawaiian Cultural Practices 101, and just really simple things. And a word that we often hear and use inappropriately is the word kahuna. And when you think about Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian society, at the very top of the Hawaiian world were the ali'i, the chiefs, the leaders, the rulers, the kings and queens, etc. And the layer of people right below them were the kahuna. And as you can see here, priest, healer, scientist, doctor, specialists in a specific field that were experts in what they understood, whether it was medicine, the building of a heiau, the building of a canoe, featherworking, genealogy, hula, etc. These people were experts in what they did, and they were important parts of Hawaiian society and absolutely meant to be respected. And it was important for us today to get away from imagery like this. Yeah, making fun. There's a fine line between having fun and making fun. And that is a lot of what I'm talking about here today is once we have a better idea, an appreciation and understanding of what we're doing, then we can absolutely take the Hawaiian language, the Hawaiian culture, history, and language as well, and share it better without making fun of the important root indigenous culture of these islands. Yeah, a little bit more for us, customs and traditions. Actually, where these pages come from, this is part of the brand guideline for the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau. So just sharing a few pages that I felt were relevant. So you might see page numbers at the bottom and wonder, what's this in reference to? And so these are actually found in our brand guidelines, and we share these with media, tour operators. Many of you listening in will have access to these brand guidelines, and if you'd like to have access to more of that, you can absolutely, I'll give you that more information later. But again, take a minute and pause on these screens so you can read it better. So here we talk about the usage of the word haole, neighbor islands, other Polynesian cultures, responsible image usage, traditions, place names, giving Hawaiian names, and surfing. Yeah, so there's actually a lot more to these, but again, pause here so that you can take some time and read each one carefully. What better describes Hawaii and its essence than hula? And as it says here, hula is a traditional dance of Hawaii. And here are a few examples. You see in the column, the first one there with the green check marks, the first column is hula kahiko, or the traditional style of hula that's been danced for 1,000+ years, originally danced by men only, and then later men and women. And today we see a lot more women dancing it as well. But hula is where our stories are embedded, where the history of Hawaii is embedded through, from an oral tradition being passed down from generation to generation. Hula is where the stories are kept. The second row there, hula awana, more modern style. When the missionaries arrived in 1820, they brought with them harmonies and melodies, and later the ukulele were introduced, and steel guitar, slack key, etc. And so more modern hula. But the very last row there, very important to recognize our love for our Polynesian cousins. Absolutely similar DNA, love our Polynesian cousins. However, when it comes to the cultures of these places, it's important to understand the difference, important to note the difference. As we see there, Samoa versus Tahiti, that's a different culture. Similar, a lot of overlap, a lot of origins, based from the same origins, but a different culture, and especially from a marketing perspective. When you're marketing and promoting Hawaii, not appropriate to use the other cultures when doing so, unless what you're promoting includes those cultures. Yeah. So for example, if you're promoting a luau that does have Samoan and Tahitian dance in it, then it's appropriate to use that imagery. But if you're just promoting the Hawaiian Islands in general, it's important to keep those images separate and for our guests to understand the differences. We don't want people to be confused. Yeah, we want everybody to understand the differences, the similarities between the Polynesian cultures, and that's again our kuleana, our privilege to be able to share that story. And not only is hula our traditional dance, it's also our spiritual dance. Yeah, so it's a way for us to connect with our ancestors, a way to connect with the elements, with nature. Very important part of this place, and it's important that we respect and honor hula in that light. The next area that we want to cover here is lei. Lei are such an important part of this destination, and lei are everything to me here in Hawaii. And so from a marketing and promotional perspective, we see two images there, one with a green check mark and one with a red no. But what and how we're promoting lei? Yeah, if you're promoting it on paper, why on earth would you use plastic flowers and plastic lei? Yeah, so the importance of sharing the flora, important sharing the beautiful flowers of these islands is something that we need to be very cognizant of and aware of when we're doing sales and marketing, when we're doing any kind of marketing pieces, any kind of imagery usage on our websites, etc. However we're doing it, it's important to take a moment, pause, and smell the flowers. We spent some time earlier talking about the significance of aloha, so hopefully that's still, in your mind and in your heart as well. And lei to me truly are the personification of aloha. Yeah, so everything that aloha is, everything that aloha means to us, that is that gesture when someone's giving you a lei, whether it's for your birthday, whether it's for an anniversary, whether it's a congratulatory graduation, whatever, maybe it's just because it's Tuesday, it doesn't matter why someone's giving you a lei. Ideally, they're giving you part of themselves, part of that aloha. That's what that lei is, that personification and extension of aloha from that person giving it to you. And it should and ideally be received with love. Yeah, so received with love. That lei is an extension of that person. Also, they're not gender specific. I've never lifted a petal to see what is this, a boy lei or a girl lei? Yeah, because lei, when given with love, when given with the proper and right intention, a lei doesn't have to be, is it for a man or a woman? What does it matter? Yeah, and I think it does come from the perhaps wedding market, if you will, or the honeymoon market, that people think about lei. You think about a picture, the woman has to have a pikake, lei pikake, and the man is wearing lei maile, that green maile around the neck. Like that's just become a norm. But break it up. It doesn't have to be. I love a beautiful lei pikake. I love the way that smells. And I think it's beautiful when women are wearing a maile. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter gender specific. There is cultural tones to that though, however, for when lei are given for specific reasons. And so that's always taken into consideration. But in general, lei are not gender specific and always worn with pride. I think when I have a lei on, I stand a little bit taller, throw it back on my neck a little bit more. You just feel loved when you wear a lei and lovingly discarded. I add that because a lot of people, after they realize the significance of a lei, that it's not just a string of flower around our neck or shells or whatever it might be, that there is this spiritual element to it. How do I discard of that once it's died? And, different ways for different people. You might take it to the grave of a loved one. You might hang it on a rock or a tree in your yard. You might discard of it in the ocean by removing the string and the ribbon, yeah, and letting the flowers go back to nature. Yeah, but again, keep taking care of that string and ribbon so that it doesn't become rubbish in a sense, if you will. But there are various ways to do that. But as long as it's done lovingly, there's various ways to discard of lei. But again, to me, lei are such an important part of Hawaii. And absolutely, when people think of Hawaii, they're thinking of that lei and that beautiful embrace when they arrive here in the Hawaiian Islands. And if ever you are curious or interested, perhaps doing some marketing, I just want to share with you the specific, somewhat, if you want to call them Mayday colors of the islands, things that we've actually embraced over 100 years ago that we're okay with. So for the island of Kauai, the color is purple. And it's not so much a flower, but rather the very fragrant and beautiful mokihana, which grows only on Kauai. It's endemic to the island of Kauai. And so if you're ever doing a marketing piece and you're not sure what colors to use for Kauai, always rock the purple. Purple is totally fine. And if you want to embrace the mokihana, please do. For the island of Oahu, the color is yellow, mele mele. The flower is the ilima. You see it there in bloom form, but then also you see how lei ilima strung together. Quite a beautiful lei. And when you ever receive a lei ilima, you know that person really, really cares about you. O'ma'o, the green of Molokai. We see there the green, absolutely verdant, lush green Molokai. The flower is the kukui or the pukua kukui. So either the flower of the kukui or the kukui itself. Alani or orange for the island of Lanai. And there we see the beautiful kaunaoa, sort of a ground cover type of a vine, if you will. And when woven together, it does make a beautiful lei. But for the island of Lanai, once again, is the color orange. And the beautiful akala or the Maui pink. The pink is all over Maui. Maui is a very beautiful pink color. And their flower is the loke or the rose. Yeah, the beautiful pink rose of Maui. Last and never least, the island of Hawaii and the ula ula or the red. And one of my favorite flowers, the ohia lehua, one of the very first growths or plants that grow from the black lava. So it's sort of the life right after the destruction, the beauty, the combination of the two coming together. Beautiful red of the island of Hawaii and the ohia lehua. And since we're talking a lot here about marketing stuff in a sense of how you're going to be using some of these things, if you're not sure, ask somebody. Ideally, you might have a cultural advisor on staff. You might have a family member or a friend who might know. You're more than welcome to reach out to us here at the Visitors Bureau to ask. But if you're not sure of something, please take a moment and ask someone who does. This question comes up a lot. If you're perhaps a tour guide, a tour escort, or planning tours or taking maybe a familiarization tour, there's so many different approaches to this, but when people go to cultural sites, they have a lot of questions, and I wanted to try to address them in this section right here. So when visiting or promoting, culturally significant or sacred sites, do so with caution or not at all. So again, when in doubt, ask, but here you go. Did you ask permission to be there? If there is no one to ask, should you even be there at all? Ask yourself, why am I visiting? Why am I taking this group? Why are we going there? What is your intention? And last but not least, have you done your homework? So basically, I'm answering the question with a bunch of other questions. But if you're able to answer these questions that you see on the screen there, then you will know if you are approaching a culturally significant or sacred site appropriately. And again, when in doubt, ask. So much information, so many different resources. We thought we'd put it together all in one place. About 10 years ago, the Hawaii Tourism Authority, and I'm honored to have helped a bit with this, 10 years ago put together the Ma'i Hawaiian Cultural Toolkit. This is a toolkit that was ideally meant for media, again, tour operators, wholesalers, etc., similar to the brand guidelines that the Hawaii Visitors Bureau has, but to give guidance, to take all the knowledge that's all over the place. Again, all knowledge taught in different schools, but trying to put it together in one place, ideally for consistency. So the toolkit has recently been updated. Ma'i 2020 has just been released earlier this year. And the very opening of it, there's a really nice introduction or table of contents, the papakuhikuhi, which helps to break down HTA's commitment, as you see there, natural resources, language, heritage, festivals, customs and traditions, sensitivities, proper place names, and contacts and resources, all things that you're going to need quite often. And what does ma'i mean? The translation of ma'i means to be cleanliness, purity, attractiveness. The idea and the intention was to take the idea of what people have had about these Hawaiian Islands for over 100 years, and a lot of it might be because of how we're perceived in Hollywood, and how the Hawaiian Islands are, I have family on the continent who actually have asked me, not recently, but when we were younger, you guys actually have electricity. And it was just funny to me to think that that's how they thought about these islands, but people to this day still ask about, you live in a grass shack. I just find it amusing, but at the same time, the perception that we have is a perception. That's what they think. That's the only information they have about these islands. And so ma'i is an opportunity to clean that up, to make it pure. It also relates to the marketing. Here at the Hawaii Visitors Bureau, founded in 1903, we've got some ads in the archives that are something that would be cringe-worthy today, but that's what they thought people wanted to see back in the day. And so the idea of the name for the toolkit is to help to cleanse and purify the way people think about these islands. To get the Ma'i toolkit, if you want to take a moment and spend some time with it, you can download it on your computer. It comes as a PDF. You can go to hawaiitourismauthority.org. The HTA website is where the Ma'i toolkit lives. And you'll find it when you scroll down to the very bottom of their page. You see it there on the left there, Ma'i. So once you get to the HTA website, scroll straight to the bottom and click on See the Ma'i Toolkit to download the actual toolkit. The essence of what we're doing today and what we want you to take away from this is about understanding and honoring, respecting and taking care of this place. Yeah, and so how can we all do that? How can we all step up? We all have a kuleana, our responsibility, again, our privilege and taking ownership of that, whether we live here or don't, yeah, whether we're selling or promoting Hawaii or whether we're on the ground with our day-to-day customers or guests, if you will. It's really about this place. The more we take care of her, the more she'll take care of us. So if you have any questions, if you want clarification, you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Once again, my name is Kainoa Danes. There's my email address, my direct office number. Please feel free to call or email at any time. And now it's time for a quiz. Question number 1. What does ho'okipa translate to in English? Hotel, hospitality, dessert, or special shirt? Next question. What best summarizes the Aloha Spirit Law? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love one another. The coordination of mind and heart within each person. All of the above. What phenomenon created the Hawaiian Islands? Tectonic plate movement and volcanic activity. It broke off from a nearby continent. Oompa Loompas, wind, wing, and wave. What does kuleana translate to? Ownership, responsibility, privilege, or all of the above? What does kahuna mean? Beach boy, a type of canoe, priest, scientist, expert, or a casual greeting? Hula is the spiritual dance of Hawaii. True or false? What is the official state tree of the state of Hawaii? The monkey pod, pineapple, kukui, or coconut? What color represents the island of Molokai? Green, purple, orange, or white? Which is the HTA Hawaii Style and Resource Toolkit? The Mu'umu'u Toolkit, the Ma'ema'e Toolkit, the Manapua Toolkit, or the Maunawili Toolkit? Which best describes protocol when visiting sacred sites? Make sure you bring a cooler of beer and poke. Do so with caution or not at all. Approach only during a full moon, or clothing optional.
On behalf of the Hawaiian Islands, mahalo for spending time with us. Hopefully you've taken away the importance and significance of the indigenous culture of Hawaii and have accepted the kuleana to present it respectfully, accurately, and always with the best intentions. Mahalo.